Brother framed me of essay 8 years ago. Now truth comes out. How to proceed?
Hello, Reddit. I'm writing from a throwaway account. I just need to get this off my chest and maybe hear some advice on how to deal with everything that's been happening. Excuse any mistakes. I just need to let it out. A little about me. I'm 39 years old, the younger of two brothers. My brother Henry is 41 now, and he was always the golden child of the family. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. For example, when he got bad grades in school, my parents would encourage him and help him improve. But if I brought home anything less than excellent, I'd hear, "We're so disappointed in you," even though I was doing fine overall. Another example, for Henry's high school graduation, he got a brand new car and a huge party. For mine, I got about $500 and a pat on the back. He wasn't a bad brother, but we lived very separate lives. I didn't complain much, but I knew I had to build my own life. I moved away, went to college, and after 5 years I got my MBA. Then I came back home and found a good job. By that point, I rarely saw my family, just on birthdays and holidays. Henry never did well in school. He barely finished high school, dropped out of college, and my parents ended up helping him open a small hardware store so he could have something to do. I was happy for him, but I focused on my own life. Around that time, I met Jenny. She was 22, we'd gone to college together, and she was also from my hometown. When we moved back, we got an apartment together, and she quickly found a job too. We started building our life side by side. In 2006, during the holidays, I introduced Jenny to my family. To my surprise, they welcomed her warmly, maybe warmer than I had ever felt in 22 years. For the first time, I felt truly loved by my parents. But I also noticed Henry couldn't stop staring at her that night. At the time, I brushed it off. After that, though, he started coming over to my place way too often. We went from seeing each other maybe once every few months to suddenly almost every single day. Eventually, I had to set boundaries. I told him straight up, "You can come sometimes, but I don't want you here every evening when Jenny and I are trying to relax after work." That led to a huge fight with my parents. In the end, Henry apologized and promised to back off. From then on, he only came by once a month on weekends, and he'd try to make small talk with Jenny. It still bothered me a little, but I tried not to make a big deal out of it. Life went on like that for a while. Then in 2009, I proposed to Jenny, and we announced our engagement. My parents were thrilled, but Henry just shook my hand and walked out of the party I had thrown. I didn't see him for a couple of weeks after that. In 2010, Jenny and I got married. Henry showed up with a date. Let's call her Kate. I thought maybe now he'd finally move on from Jenny and focus on his own life. He and Kate moved quickly, too, getting married 9 months later in 2011. Our marriage was great. We had our first daughter, Alice, in 2011, and our second, Sarah, in 2013. But Henry's marriage didn't last. He and Kate divorced in 2012. A couple of weeks after their divorce, Kate messaged me and admitted that Henry had been obsessed with Jenny, and that was the main reason they split. I apologized to her and wished her well. Later, I asked Jenny about it, and she told me Kate had always been cold and distant toward her. I decided to confront Henry in front of the whole family. I asked him straight, "Why are you ruining your life over some obsession with my wife?" He was caught off guard, denied everything, and we had a huge fight. In the end, I told him he was no longer welcome in my home. My parents and Jenny later begged me not to cut him off, reminding me that he was still family. So for everyone's sake, I decided to ease up. And for a while, it actually looked like he was trying to move on with his life. Fast forward to 2015. I can still remember that day as if it happened yesterday. It was July 25th. I had been running errands all day. My wife had taken both of our daughters to visit her parents. Sometime after lunch, my father called me. His voice was full of anger, and he ordered me to come to their house immediately. As soon as I walked in, I felt the tension in the air. My wife was a crying mess. My parents were trying to calm her down, and some extended family members were there too. I asked what was going on, and my parents hit me with it. They called me that word. I won't say it here to avoid Reddit's wrath. I was stunned. They claimed that a couple of weeks earlier at a party, I had assaulted a girl and then messaged her telling her not to tell anyone, or there would be consequences. I knew this girl, Amanda. We had gone to high school together. She was part of a larger group of friends I occasionally hung out with. According to her, after the party at a club, I supposedly followed her to her car and did it there. She showed my wife screenshots of the alleged conversation and told her the whole story. My father slapped me across the face, and my parents said they never wanted to see me again. Jenny was shouting that we were done. I tried to convince them I had done nothing, but no one would listen. I was basically thrown out of their house. They told me Jenny and the kids wouldn't be coming back, and my father would come over to collect their things from my apartment. When he arrived, I begged and pleaded, but he just packed their bags and said, "Never contact us again. If you do, I'll personally hand you over to the police." By that evening, Henry had shared the screenshots and all the details in our extended family WhatsApp group, and I was unanimously kicked out. In the days that followed, friends started calling me, telling me they were disgusted and never to contact them again. I was falling apart, not eating, not sleeping, unable to work. Even my boss had heard the rumors, but couldn't do anything until there was actual police action. He advised me to resign voluntarily to keep my record clean and promised he wouldn't make me serve my notice period. I tried to argue, but he said, "If the cops come knocking, you'll be fired anyway. No severance, and your record will be ruined." So I reluctantly agreed and left my job. In mid-August, while I was still drowning in misery, I received 2 documents from the court. One was a letter of disownment, and the other was divorce papers. I was drunk, but I went to my parents' house anyway. My brother met me at the door, beat me bloody, called me a disgrace to the family, and said it was good they had disowned me. I was bleeding and barely able to stand. My parents and my wife just watched from a distance and did nothing. I somehow pulled myself up in tears, realizing I had lost everyone and everything I knew. I locked myself away in my apartment for the duration of the divorce. It went as amicably as it could. Because I was unemployed and my ex-parents agreed to support the children themselves, I didn't have to pay child support or alimony. By January 2016, I was officially divorced, but trying to pick up the pieces of my life was brutal. I thought about confronting Amanda, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it could only make things worse. In my country, with one phone call, I could be looking at 5 or 6 years in prison. In February 2016, I was in a serious accident and spent nearly 5 weeks recovering. The hospital staff said they called my emergency contact, which was still Jenny at that point, and she hung up. No one came. When I finally recovered, I realized I'd burned through most of my savings. I needed to get back on my feet, at least to keep a roof over my head. But I knew I couldn't do it where I was. I sold my furniture, paid off the rest of my rent, and decided to start from scratch in a different place. I moved to a city 2 hours away and tried to find a job. No luck. I drank heavily, spiraled into despair, and thoughts of ending it all became constant. Waking up drenched in cold sweat from nightmares became my new normal. About 4 months went by like that. One day, by pure chance, I ran into an old acquaintance from college, James. Back then, he had been the quiet kid who barely spoke to anyone, so seeing him after all these years was a shock. He spotted me in the crowd, called my name, and we greeted each other. We started talking. I told him I was in the city looking for work. He said he had just quit his job and was planning to open his own management consulting firm. Then he invited me out for a drink. That evening, after a long talk about our lives and careers, he told me he was looking for people to join his team and offered me a spot. I knew I needed something to keep my mind occupied or I was going to lose it. So I said yes, but asked to meet his team first before making any decisions. 2 days later, he introduced me to a guy named Derek. He said for now, it would just be the three of us. I shook Derek's hand, but told him right away, before we go any further, I need to be honest. And I spilled everything, how I'd been accused, disowned, and left completely alone. I told it through tears, but I needed them to know. James and Derek listened. They said they were sorry, but also reassured me, if you don't have an actual criminal case against you, there won't be a problem. I told them the police had never even come to my door. They both sighed in relief. James said he'd still run a background check just to be safe. I understood and agreed. At the time, I was living in a rundown apartment to cut my costs. I waited. 2 weeks went by. I kept looking for other jobs just in case. Then James called me and we met up. He said, "You're clean. Nothing on your record," and he officially welcomed me to the team. From that moment, I threw myself into work. I started therapy. On Derek's advice, I joined a gym and pounded my frustration into the punching bag. I'd been an average 70 kilos, but over time I bulked up to 98. Derek and I became like brothers, training together, working together. I started seeing him as the older brother Henry should have been. By the end of 2018, I finally had control over my life again. The consulting firm took off. The money started coming in, and I rented a nice apartment in a decent neighborhood. It felt like it was time to take the next step. I went to court and legally changed my last name. I took Derek's surname with his family's blessing. For me, it wasn't just paperwork. They had welcomed me into their lives, invited me to family gatherings, and at his wedding, I even stood as his best man. It was my way of thanking them. I tried dating a few times, but my past and my scars kept getting in the way. Until 2019, when I met Kim. She was 28, half Korean and half Italian. I met her at a coffee shop where I often went for my morning cup. She worked behind the counter. At first, it was just small smiles and a few words. One day I went there with Derek, and he noticed she kept looking at me. He nudged me. "You should ask her out." I worked up the courage and asked her to go for drinks. We had a lovely evening. She said she wanted to see me again. But I already knew how these things usually went. I tell them about my past, and they disappear. So on our second date over lunch, I decided to be upfront. I said, "Listen, I have to be honest. I've been through something very heavy that cost me everything. I could never hurt a woman, but I was accused, and I'm still trying to recover from the fallout. You need to understand what you're getting into before we go any further." She looked blindsided, like someone had thrown cold water on her. I thought, this is the end. But a couple of days later, she called me herself and asked to meet. We met again at the same coffee shop. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I trust you. I want to give this a chance." I sat across from her, tears in my eyes, barely believing that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of normalcy was finally coming back into my life. We started dating, going out together, and for the first time I felt like I was actually beginning to heal. With Kim, I took my first vacation in years. We went to Europe, and it was amazing. When COVID hit in 2020, we stayed connected over phone calls and FaceTime. By the second half of that year, when life started to feel somewhat normal again, Kim asked if she could move in with me. I said yes. She'd lost her job at the coffee shop and was trying to find something new. She also turned out to be an incredible cook, and I suggested maybe she could start her own food business. By mid-2021, with financial support from her parents, she had set up a cloud kitchen, basically a small kitchen delivering food to the neighborhood. Both of our lives were heading in the right direction. Yes, the scars were still there. I no longer had thoughts of ending it all, but the nightmares still came back sometimes. In February 2023, Kim told me she was pregnant. A flood of emotions hit me: joy, fear, tears for what I'd lost, everything at once. I was all over the place. Kim held me, calmed me, and we fell asleep in each other's arms. A couple of days later, I proposed to her. She said yes with so much joy. It felt like my life was finally moving toward something normal again. We were planning our wedding for June of this year, and everything was in full swing. Sorry for the long post, but I need you to understand what an emotional roller coaster this has been. At the end of May, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I heard a woman crying, "Hi, it's Amanda." I recognized that voice instantly. Rage boiled up inside me and I hung up. Kim saw my face and came over, concerned. I told her who it was. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, Kim answered and put it on speaker. On the line was a man. He introduced himself as Amanda's fiancé and said she wanted to confess what she'd done years ago. Amanda got on the phone, crying, apologizing over and over again. I sat there in tears, not even sure what I was feeling. Kim did most of the talking. She said they'd call back later, then immediately called Derek. He listened to everything and said, "We need to make this official. Have her confess in front of a lawyer. It'll protect you in the future." I called my lawyer, explained everything. He set up a meeting at his office and prepared to record it on camera. I called Amanda and told her, "You'll come to my lawyer's office. We'll talk there." 3 days later we met. Amanda looked half dead. Her fiancé, Mark, was the only one with her. We sat across from each other. My lawyer started the recording. Kim sat by my side. Amanda began to talk. Here's the gist of it. Back in 2015, she'd been secretly dating Henry. He was the one behind the entire accusation. He planned it, and she went along because she was in love with him and would do anything for him. He bought a new phone, stole my profile picture from WhatsApp, and together they faked a conversation to prove her story. My tears turned into rage. Honestly, if it hadn't been for Kim, I might have lost it and gotten myself arrested for assault right then and there. Kim was furious, too. Hormones, pregnancy, everything at once. And she tore into Amanda with words so hard that Amanda could barely sit still. The lawyer tried to keep things civil, but it was clear Kim was livid. She even told Mark straight to his face, "If you still marry this piece of trash, you deserve whatever's coming to you." Fighting back tears and anger, I asked them, "Why are you telling me this now?" Mark explained, "A week ago we were drinking, and she blurted out how she once helped an ex destroy someone's marriage. I couldn't get it out of my head. I kept pressing her until she finally came clean. I told her, if you ever want peace, you need to confess. Otherwise, you'll carry this for the rest of your life." It turned out that after she helped Henry, he quickly grew cold, distanced himself, and broke up with her 6 months later. She felt awful, but was too scared to tell the truth. She spent years in therapy trying to work through her guilt, but only now found the courage to come clean. When everything had been laid out on the table, my lawyer paused the meeting. "Let's take a 30-minute break and come back," he said. Amanda and Mark stepped out, and he turned to me. "If you want, we can go after your brother and Amanda for defamation." We have more than enough evidence. I was boiling with anger, but I decided I didn't want this to ruin my wedding. Whatever I chose to do could wait. I told Amanda I'd contact her later, but for now, she was not to tell anyone else. I didn't want any drama from my ex-family spilling into my wedding. After the meeting, Kim hugged me and said she had been right to trust her gut, that a weight had lifted off her shoulders. I felt the same way. We had a small wedding with James and Derek as my best men, and then a 3-week honeymoon across Europe. It was an amazing time. I managed not to let what I'd heard destroy our trip, although the nightmares came more frequently, and Kim was always there to support me. I also talked with my therapist, who told me that sooner or later I would need to confront my ex-family, if only for closure. I thought long and hard. In July, I called Amanda and told her what she had to do. I said I would be taking legal action based on her confession, but if she didn't want to be financially ruined, she would have to follow my condition. She needed to meet Jenny face to face and tell her everything she had told us in the lawyer's office. She cried on the phone and said Mark had left her. I told her I wished I could feel sorry, but I couldn't. Karma catches up with everyone. It caught her, now it's coming for my brother. A couple of days later, I got a message. It was from Jenny. Even though she had blocked me, I'd still been sending her birthday wishes, greetings for our daughters, and holiday texts for all these years. This was the first message I'd received in 8 years. She wrote that she wanted to talk. I didn't want to be alone when I had that conversation, so I told her I'd call back in a few hours. At home, with Kim beside me, I dialed her. Immediately, I could hear Jenny sobbing on the other end. She could hardly speak before finally telling me how sorry she was and how terrible she felt, I somehow kept my composure. I told her how deeply it hurt that she had so easily believed Henry's lies. I asked about my daughters. She said they were doing well, and asked when she had met Amanda. She said 2 days ago. It took me time to process how wrong she had been, how quickly she had walked away from me. She had already told my ex-parents everything, and they were stunned. They all wanted to contact me, but she insisted she should apologize first. I told her what she had done was beyond hurtful. I asked, what happened to the golden child? She said he'd been kicked out of the house. I couldn't help but chuckle. She admitted that a year after our divorce, she had married Henry. He had supported her through everything. Suddenly, it all made sense. He had never let her go. She told me they even had a daughter together. After that conversation, I laid out my terms clearly. First, she had to contact all of my former extended family herself and tell them what a piece of trash Henry really was. Second, I was only interested in co-parenting my 2 girls. I had no intention of reconciling with her beyond what was necessary to have a relationship with my daughters. Third, I would text her the date and time when I wanted to meet my ex-parents, and we would talk in person. After the call, I just hugged Kim. She was pregnant, her emotions already all over the place, so I kept mine in check, but I think she was crying for both of us. We fell asleep. The next morning, when I turned on my phone, there was a flood of messages, over 50 missed calls and hundreds of texts. They had even added me back to the family group chat where everyone was apologizing. In the following days, I started receiving messages from old friends as well, apologizing for how quickly they had judged me. I sent only one reply to the family group. I wrote that they had officially disowned me 8 years ago, that I was now an outsider and intended to stay that way. Whether I forgave them or not would happen on my terms, on my timeline, not theirs. I asked them not to add me again and left the group. Some relatives tried to message me, saying they were disappointed in my reaction. I shut them down. You're in no position to judge me after how fast you believe the worst. Don't contact me unless I contact you first. A couple of weeks later, I called Jenny and told her I wanted her to bring my girls over for the weekend. I needed to see them properly. Kim, stubborn and fiery as she is, said she wanted to meet her stepdaughters too. We argued. I told her she needed to think about herself and the baby, but in the end I gave in. She had a steel will. We met in a public park. Jenny looked a bit worn, but had clearly made an effort to look her best for this meeting. And there, for the first time in 8 years, I saw Alice and Sarah. They had grown so much. My only memories of them until then had been the pictures on my phone, because I'd been blocked from every social platform and every channel. Jenny burst into tears and tried to hug me, but I put my hands up and stepped back. Then I introduced her to Kim as my wife, and Jenny broke down, sobbing right there in the park. Kim walked over and comforted her. We sat down nearby, and I pulled my girls into my arms and cried too. They hadn't known about me until recently and were confused. They'd always believed Henry was their father, but seeing me triggered something. There were a lot of tears and a lot of talking. By evening, we were sharing stories about what our lives had been like. Jenny told me she had married Henry a year after the divorce. He took care of her for the first few years, but then things leveled out. His landscaping business never became profitable, and when COVID hit, it completely shut down. Their parents started dipping into their savings to make ends meet, and Henry never even tried to start something new despite their urging. She said she was filing for divorce because she couldn't stand to look at him anymore. I told her, "That's your choice. It has nothing to do with me." Then I laid out my plans. I want Alice and Sarah to go to family therapy with me. They've been robbed of their real father, and it's time to make things right. I want to be part of their lives. I also told her I wanted the girls to spend weekends with me and Kim, but that would have to wait. We have a child of our own coming, and I want to give that my full energy for now. Jenny added that my parents wanted to talk to me. I corrected her. They're not my parents. They officially disowned me, and I still have the letter they sent with the divorce papers. But both she and Kim said the meeting could help me get closure. I agreed. I told her I'd decide when and where to meet them. I booked a hotel for them and said I wanted another day with my girls. On Sunday, we walked around the city, went to the sights. It was wonderful. Before they left, both girls hugged me tightly and I said, "See you next week." I told Jenny she didn't need to drive them for therapy. I would come to their city. I found a good therapist, and we had our first introductory session. The therapist told me straight, "Sooner or later they need to know what your brother did." I said I'd tell them, but in my own time. She suggested I write my story out here to get some outside perspectives. Honestly, if it hadn't been for Derek pushing me forward, I don't think I would have made it to this point. And that's why I'm writing to you, Reddit. What should I do from here? I plan to meet my ex-parents sooner or later. Even though I call them ex, I still have emotions and feelings toward them. Maybe that sounds illogical, but it's true. How should I handle Henry? I don't think I ever want to see his face again. But should I sue him and destroy him with a defamation case, knowing he has a daughter with Jenny and anything I do will impact her too? If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. TLDR. 8 years ago, my brother framed me with a false accusation to destroy my marriage and marry my wife. Now the truth has come out. How do I move forward?
And that's where the story ends. Unfortunately, there's no continuation. But let's think together. What would you do if you were in his place? Would you forgive your parents, give them a chance to meet, or close that door forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Also, let us know if you enjoyed this story and if we should keep finding and narrating stories like this from Reddit. If you like this format, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode.